Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Bikini and the Brain. I'm here with the Bikini. She did, in case you guys were wondering if you guys are watching or not, she did a thing this weekend.
I did a thing. Yes, I did.
And that thing was?
I competed in the Nevada State for the second year in a row and defended my title successfully. So that's good. Fun stuff. And you know what I was thinking about the other day? Didn't Phoebe win the year before too?
Yeah.
Look at this Team Elite Physique just dominating the Nevada State. I love that.
You know what? It was a fun day. This is good. Look at you. Another award for. We were talking to Matt about this. We're like, we're going to run out of wall space for Ashley's medals. So
that's the goal.
I said, if the problem is get more walls or have Ashley compete less, I'm going to get more walls.
Love it. The more walls, the better. Yes, that is one of my motivating factors. Competing is like, I just want to win you some decorations.
I wonder how many our drywall can support. We're really testing the limits here. Well, congratulations, Ashley. That was awesome.
I appreciate it. And Coach Adam, as an award to me, gave me the WD-40. If you tuned into last week's podcast, this is a new product to me. So, what was it? 2020, you said if I won 3 shows, I would win your car, right?
Yes.
So 2020, I won 3 shows and I won your car. And nowadays we've downgraded just slightly, just slight. But this is for the car.
Yes. You can,
so,
squeaky door.
I'm not complaining. I never expect anything. But perhaps it can also double as like a glaze for your tan. I don't know. We'll try.
Yeah. And what's funny is there is kind of a secret message in there because there's WD-40. Right?
Yes.
Yeah, and you got 38. This is your 38th win.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's the goal to hit 40. I like that.
And that wasn't even a thing. I just realized it right now.
That's a good.
It's like a omen, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So
and it's low odor too. So yeah. I like that.
So I'm gonna do something for her when she gets to 40. It's not if she'll get to 40. There's a matter of when at one point or day.
An extra large can of WD-40.
Yes, a lot of squeaky doors.
We don't want squeaky doors.
No, you'll find use for it. Watch, I promise you. I had to get it last episode because she didn't know what it was, and I was like, "You don't know what WD-40 is?" It's so funny.
Yeah, I'll find a use.
So we have what are we talking about today? I thought this topic was good. I like this topic.
Yes. So today's topic, working with what you got. Contrary to popular belief, no one is complete. Nobody on stage is complete. We all have flaws. Now, sometimes you can hide those flaws. You can work around your flaws, but we all have them. So, I think it's important to discuss like some of the common flaws that people might be having and how to train around it, train to improve it, and kind of pose around it to kind of hide those flaws you have. And if you're not watching, these are air quotations, flaws, right? Because one person's flaws can be somebody else's like benefit, But if we're speaking on the sport of physique and aesthetics, that's totally different from like powerlifting or sports that are more, athletic, performance based.
Yeah, and it's funny too is that you say every sport has that, right?
Yes.
We think about it like if in powerlifting, if you have shorter arms, it's beneficial for the bench press because you don't have to go travel as much distance.
Yes,
if you're shorter on the legs, it's less on the deadlift, right?
Yes.
Like things like that. So like every sport does have
absolutely world's strongest man too. They're like 6'5" huge dude. You don't really see any like 5'4" scrawny guys. As a track athlete myself, I could even look at different bodies and kind of assume what they were doing. Like, oh, that guy's definitely a sprinter. Like, look at those hamstrings, those high calves, fast twitch muscles all the way. If I saw like somebody that was stockier and tall and a little on the fluffy side, maybe a shot putter, or a high jumper, they'd be tall and lean, So every sport has its like, I guess, ideal mold for what helps them the most. And that's no different from us. Although on the bikini stage, there are a few different, physiques, different types of physiques, but for the most part, they fit into a certain mold, but not all the time.
Yeah. That's interesting. I never really thought about it as that way. But it's definitely with every single sport. Yeah. It's really, and Ours is, we're talking about different things, where it's going to be maybe your legs are shorter than your torso. Maybe your hips aren't set super wide. Maybe, and it's all going to come down to how you present it. And the goal in Bikini is to present as close to flawless as possible, but everyone has an issue. Everyone has a flaw, So let's go. What are some of the examples that you have there?
I think for the most part, a lot of competitors might deal with like a wide waistline, being too thick, right? So I think this can come from a few different things. One, maybe their obliques are too developed, right? And also a rib cage too. So if you have a wide rib cage, there's not a lot you can do to kind of train that down necessarily, but there's things you can do to kind of train around it to give the appearance that it's smaller than what it actually is. You know what I mean? Also, the length of your torso is also a determining factor, right? Usually shorter torsos typically would have a wider waistline, but not all the time. Whereas like a long stretched out torso is usually thinner because it has more room to kind of meet in the middle a little better. Kind of like Kimber.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
She has a little waist in a good way.
Yeah, little way. And it's so small that sometimes that could even be bad, right? It can throw off. I'm like, yes. So it's funny how everyone has their issues with those things. So, yeah, and for her, it's, bring up her lats a little bit, make it look not as narrow, pose a little harder so it's not as long of a torso. Like there's a whole bunch of little things you can do for that scenario and a bunch of different scenarios too. And another one that I run into too is like, just your clavicle base. Like you're just a small shoulder base, which people run into. And then basically what that means is how wide you're set structurally before you put on any muscle, and then how you look when you put on muscle. So someone who's got a narrow clavicle base may need to put on more muscle than the regular person, and they may need to pose a little harder in that front pose and kind of be more upright and tall and a little wider and really go over with their shoulders, versus someone who's got a really wide shoulder base might just have their shoulders a little bit back and not need to build as much. So
right.
Yeah.
So let's backtrack a little bit to the waistline issue, because I do want to talk about like possible solutions and how to outpose it. And
I
then
just
we'll
skipped
get
right over that.
Yeah, like
I'm like, yep, you got to add waist. Sorry.
Let's talk about your flaws, but not tell you how to fix them.
Yeah,
and a boo boo.
We're just staying. I need a competitive edge, Ashley. No advice for anyone.
No advice. We're just going to tell you.
Pay for access.
Yes, you have to pay additional to find the solutions. So for the waistline, let's say this is an oblique development issue, okay? Not rib cage related, but an oblique development issue, which means the sides of your abdominals are very thick, right? This can often happen from maybe doing too many compound movements, or it could be from a previous sport that you played. For example, CrossFit. If you notice a CrossFit build, they're not really hourglass. They're very, very oblique heavy, very trap heavy, right? So is this something that can be prevented, and how to train around an oblique line that's way too thick?
Yeah. And, sometimes it's just a genetic thing too. And you just try to minimize it, you know? And so one of the things that is helpful, and people will argue with me on this one too. And that's the problem with this is it's not, you can't really prove it in terms of like, and from a scientific way. Like it's just like, it seems to work. And so we do it just in case, which is wearing a belt when you exercise to try to not let the obliques be used as much, right? But there's arguments against it that the obliques are used more, but that's only if you purposely do it. So I think that it does help. Wearing a belt tight, wearing a waist trainer outside of the gym. And then of course, what Ashley said, compound movements. If I have someone with really thick oblique lines, I'm like, hey, sit in a machine for like as much as you could possibly do. If you're doing a squat, do a machine squat. If you're doing a hip thrust, try to do a machine hip thrust, something that stabilizes you. If you're doing, a lunge, do a Smith lunge where you're more stabilized, where you're using less of your core to stabilize yourself. A lot of little things like that, cut any plyos. If you're doing cardio, try to be stabilized as you can while you're doing cardio. Instead of running, do a stair-mill where you can hold on to the edges, right, a little bit. So you're not as, because when you're constantly stabilizing yourself, you're using your obliques, you're using your transverse, you're using a lot of your abs to basically stabilize yourself. So yeah, we're trying to use them as little as possible, So that's and it sucks because some people really like doing heavy squats and heavy deadlifts, and it's like, hey, you know what, you got some thick obliques, and if you want to do this sport right, you're probably going to need to not do that for you specifically. Absolutely. So and it's one of those things. And I'm going to be doing a review this week too, but we've been training really hard with Elizabeth for a while. She came out, lived here, did the 2-a-day thing. Like she really came out hard. And then this is the first time she's leaned out for a show since then. And she had her obliques were a little bit more muscly, right? So we're pulling her back on everything. I'm like, you're sitting in a machine, you're doing circuits for a while, like zero ab anything, living in a waist train for the next week, like that type of thing. And then, so it's like, can we bring them down enough to soften them up a tad? Because they're strong, but she's been lifting really hard for, I don't know, 7 months now, 8 months. So like really hard. So of course it's going to develop a little bit. So now it's like, okay, we got the muscle now, but now it's too much in that area, tone that area down, and then we'll be complete. Right. So it's bikini sculpting is a really, it's an interesting thing, right? It's like and that's what I think people understand, even with genetics like hers, which are great, it's going to take time. Like you guys understand this is a long-term sport. This is a very long-term sport to fully sculpt that piece of clay. Like it is a long time. So
yes, absolutely. I don't think people realize how much they're using their core, like even doing just everyday exercises and stuff like that. You'd be surprised. And I know a lot of times people that don't like to wear waist belts or whatever, they like to purposely concentrate on keeping their core tight for that reason, but it's still hard to not use it, because abs are, like many things, very genetically predispositioned. And, for myself just speaking for me, not that like my waistline's thick, but my abs can get a little too overly developed for bikini, meaning like they become a little too 3D. So in bikini, you don't want like 3D abs. Like if you were to run your finger down your abs, you shouldn't feel like bump, bump, bump. They should just be like, you can see that they're defined, but not projecting. So I don't train abs. I never do. It's like one of those body parts on me that's like already there, so I don't need to. It's like, it's only going to hurt me. So I avoid training any abs. I don't have any oblique problems though. My obliques aren't thick. It's just like the actual abs itself. So, you just got to train for your own physique because we're all, different.
Yeah. I have some women training abs, 6 days a week because they have no definition. And then I have some like, don't even look at it. I think, because you want, how she said, basically a kiss of muscle, but you don't want a tortoise shell,
Yes.
So just a kiss of muscle on those abs. And it's kind of a give and take too. It's kind of a tricky one because the more muscle you have there, the leaner you're going to look without needing to be as low as body fat, No. And that's what you see with the bodybuilders these days. I like to use a lot of examples for bodybuilders because it's obvious, it's a lot easier to see. But it's funny is like the old school bodybuilders make fun of the new school bodybuilders. And it's always like this old school versus new school thing, right? And they say, yeah, we got a lot leaner back then. We got shredded back then. And I'm like, yeah, but you guys were 20 pounds less in muscle. You guys had a lot less muscle. So you needed to get leaner to see the same effect. You're ignoring the fact that they're way bigger now. And to get the same effect, they can be 1%, 2% higher in body fat because you don't need to be leaner than a certain point. Like if you could see everything and you have cross feathering, why would you get even leaner? Like the judges aren't asking for it. So why, so, and it's funny, like that's the difference. And so when you think about bikini, yeah, obviously you're not going to go to those extremes, but the more muscle you have, the leaner you're going to look naturally because the skin, the muscle is just pushing farther, like the grooves are deeper. So you could see it easier and it looks leaner, so that's the thing. And that's, even a lot of times when you're the smallest, your smallest, people are like, man, you look great. You look big. Like I remember when I was competing and I'd be small, like I'd feel like all sucked up and tiny. Well, because my insertions were showing because I was leaner and the muscle was closer to the skin, everyone's like, man, you look so big. And that's the difference. So the more it protrudes, the less lean you have to be. So that's something that someone can use. Let's say you got a tiny waistline and it's too small. Well, that would be something you could do. You could come in actually softer, make your waistline bigger by getting the rest of your muscles bigger and looking the same with having a little bit thicker of a waistline that'll help potentially. Right? So it's like all these scenarios at this upper level are crazy. Yeah.
And that's what I was going to say too, is for the ladies that have like a thicker rib cage, obviously you can't train down your rib cage. It's there. It's a wider rib cage. It is what it is. And like I mentioned previously as well, like if you have a short torso plus a wide rib cage, that can make your waistline look quite thick. So, something you do, like you kind of touched upon, just build around it. So make those shoulders bigger, make that back wider, and maybe a little more on the lower half too, just to kind of create an hourglass frame that you didn't have previously. So you have to kind of create your own curves in a way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's you're gonna have to build everything out. And the good thing is, as long as you're not going past the, how you said, hourglass frame, you're gonna be fine. And that's the thing that you could talk to some of these upper level judges about too, like a Sandy or someone, and she'll say, I want to see a very pretty, maybe exaggerated hourglass shape, but not an X frame. Right. And that's the difference of bikini. And so you just have to be careful with that, but you can get pretty big without going that far. So it's just a matter of sculpting it right. And then, getting in front of those judges and asking them that question too.
Absolutely.
But these higher level judges will be able to kind of pick that up right away, so.
Yeah. And let's say this lady is wanting to compete on stage. How should she pose if she has a wider waistline?
Yeah. So with someone, and this is going to be the tricky one, right? Because your instinct, right? Intuitively, you would always say as much profile as possible, like as profile as possible. But it also depends. It's not just the waistline. It's the ratio that makes the waistline look smaller, right? So if this lady has a wider waistline, but she's also has a really wide clavicle base, well, then maybe she can open up her waistline a little more, because the wider her shoulders are, the smaller her ratio will look, and her waistline will look smaller. And that's the thing. Recently, I had a girl email me because a judge told her, and this wasn't like a high-level judge. A judge told her, if someone has a smaller waistline than you, no matter what you do, they're most likely going to win, right? And I'm like, no, it's a ratio thing, not a waistline thing. Like, it has nothing to do with, it's not a waistline contest.
Right.
Otherwise, I just wouldn't feed Ashley at all and like keep her in a waist trainer 24/7, and we'd probably win. It's not, that doesn't work that way. It's a ratio contest, right? So that's why you'll see girls with bigger waistlines. She's like, how does she win? She's got a bigger waist. Well, her ratios are still better than whoever, right? So that's the thing. So you're going to pose for your ratio. Most likely, you're going to be mostly profile on your waistline. But again, the shoulders have to be wide enough to offset that. If you're posing really small on your shoulders and you're posing really small on your waistline, your ratios, it's not really helping your ratio. So these days they want that basically front on shoulder width with as small as waistline as you can have. So however that works best for that person. So
absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's also important to mention digestion as well, because obviously that plays a big role into how small your waistline can get. So obviously there's not a one size fits all, a protocol for digestion. It could be a food sensitivity issue. It could be anything, it could be a medication. It could just be that you're overeating. Who knows what it is? Yeah. But it's definitely something to try to, figure out before you step on stage, and just to try to get the smallest waistline possible. And, I think one of little secret here, guys, on show day, I keep my foods very minimal, or I should say I consume high calorie dense foods that don't take up a lot of volume. For example, sunflower seed butter and honey. That's my go-to. Yeah. Think about it. It doesn't take up much space in your stomach, but it still gives me my carbs, my fats, my energy. I don't necessarily need protein before I step on stage. I'm not going to lose my gains in 2 hours. It's fine. So it's probably not a good idea to eat steak and broccoli before you step on stage, because that's probably going to be digesting in your stomach for 24 hours or so, So I think it's silly when people really get these dense, voluminous foods that they'll eat before show. And I'm just like, well, haze in the barn, like that saying. Haze in the barn, what's done is done. You're not going to lose your gains if you didn't have meat in the morning. So my suggestion is just keep the foods light. Obviously stay full, but you can still do that with foods that don't take up a lot of space. They're easy to digest, and they give you your energy and your fullness and all that. So that's my suggestion. Yeah.
And I think that's a good thing too. Not just, this kind of goes out of this topic, but one thing that I run into a lot of is people saying, oh, what if my coach isn't there the day of the show? Just so you guys know how she said haze in the barn, there's very little to be done the day of the show. Very, very little. If you're waking up on Saturday morning and you need a whole bunch of stuff to fill you out right or whatever, you kind of messed up. Because the catch-up window of that is not that day. You can help a little bit with water and stuff and a little bit with carbs, but it's the problem is the digestion process takes so long to eat the food, digest it, get in the bloodstream, store it in the muscle. It's a long process. people think, oh, I'm going to have a rice cake and honey before I step on stage 45 minutes from now. And it's going to be
time it like perfectly. Like, oh my God.
Yeah. It's going to be in my shoulders and in my butt, like stored and looking full and round. And, you know, should I have one rice cake or two rice cakes? Like, I'm like, hey, like we did that on Thursday. Like it's not like Thursday is usually the most important day of your peak week. Friday sometimes, you know, if you're, you know, situationally, but Thursday, Wednesday, like those are kind of the most important days of peak week, because you're trying to store in that muscle, not wake up flat and then store it, you know, 4 hours later. Good luck with that, because most likely it's going to be sitting in the stomach. It's going to blow out your waistline a little bit. And then, you know, the next day you'll probably be looking better and you're like, man, I wish I would have looked like this yesterday. And so it's just for those of you, because a lot of people are using online coaches. I'm not just saying for us. You know, we have team shows where we'll have our coaches there or whatever. So we'll be there. But honestly, back there, it's like more of like a moral support. It's like, oh yeah, your hair looks good. Let's start pumping. Let's get you oiled. It's like, it's really basic. It's not like, oh crap, your arms they're looking a little flat. Let's eat some honey. You're going to be filled out in an hour. Like you're on stage. Hurry now. Get it in. So just so you guys know, like it's just not the way the human body works. If it did work that way, it would be a very risky thing just being like alive. Like we'd need to have like just food around us at all times. If we're just flattening out and like, you know, running out of like storage of energy that fast, like just think about how the human body works, and how the periods of time we would go through. Like, let's say you lived in Colorado 200 years ago and it froze over. You might not have food, you know, at all for 3 days. There might be all the crops are frozen over, or there might not be any meat to eat. You might have just, you know, we're made to hold food in our body for a long period, to hold energy in our body for a long period. So just so you guys could have that peace of mind. Right. Don't freak out if you're, you know, and if you wake up the day of the show flat, you're most likely going to be flat going on to the show. Like that's just how it is. Like it's really going to be hard to catch up. It takes a long time to digest food and get it into your system, in your muscles. Yes. So rest assured, if you were having regrets like, oh man, I would have won the show if I just would have had one more rice cake. that wasn't it. Probably not it. Yeah. That wasn't it. So now you can live your life without those woulda, coulda, shoulda. I like to tell people that too, because it puts them at ease the day of the show. So they need to go into the show day like as stress-free as possible, because the stress can make you hold water, and you need to understand like it's done, you know, and you need to just enjoy that day, because there's really not much you can do. You could, if you ate nothing and the show was on at 8 p.m., yeah, you could flatten out a little bit, but you're not going to do that. But you're also not going to completely fill out by 8 p.m. if you were flat going in. So you just need to understand what's done is done. And now it's time to really just relax and enjoy the show, enjoy your time, understand that there's, you know, not much that can be done that day in terms of really filling you out 100%. This is not bodybuilding. You don't need to worry about having like cross-feathered quads. That it does matter a little bit more closely to the show, because you're like talking about cross-feathering and detail of like quad separation. But bikini's just not that lean where you would need to be that concerned with it, you know? So with bodybuilding, yeah, water consumption, all that little stuff, like it matters a lot more than bikini, which is, so just understand that, you know, and I think people get a lot of their peak week nerves from listening to a bodybuilding peak week protocol where they're like, you know, water this, sodium, this, like, it's not the same for bikini. It is a different thing. So absolutely. Yeah. So just to put you guys at ease. Yes. But anyway, yeah. So. Yes. The only thing I think is, you know, make sure that you're at least eating. I mean, that's important. So you don't have any energy issues or a low blood sugar. I don't know. I don't have that issue, but you know, something to be aware of. Okay. So moving on to the next, you briefly mentioned before I interrupted you, a narrow clavicle base. Yeah. So again, this is a genetics game, guys. And, it is unfortunate. The higher you climb, the more of a genetic component is going to be part of it, I will say. At a local level, at an NPC level, not as important, but obviously the better you are genetically made up, of course, the better the odds are going to be for you to win. But when you really climb to the top, because you're talking about, you have to have pretty good genetics to win a local show. Then you have to have good genetics to win a national show. Then you have to have really good genetics to win a pro show, and you have to have superior genetics to win the Olympia, right? It's like levels, right, of everything. And everything levels up in every sport. And that is part of it. There's no way around that. And then it's just a matter of getting what you have and making them better. You know, there's some, you've seen some Olympia champions even without, you know, wider hips. You've seen some Olympia champions with a little bit of a wider waistline. You've seen some Olympia champions that didn't have the widest clavicle base. So there are, you know, it's not like you need to be perfect to get that far, but the people who've done that, and every Olympia champion has had something with them, like something is a little bit, could be better. You just have to work with it and pose it so you can't see it, and then build as much as you can around it too. So the narrow clavicle base is basically, you know, how your shoulders sit and how wide and how straight they sit too. Some people have a more of a rounded shoulder base where you'll see like a more of a diamond shoulder where it's kind of rounded, and some people have a really square one, like a really square long one. Like the most obvious one would probably be like Janet. Like if you look at her, she's just like really square up top on her shoulders. It's like a wide and kind of straight. And that's great for bikini because you just look bigger when it's less diamondy. It looks wider. So that's, you know, that would be like an ideal one. But you could look at, you know, so she has that, but there's other things that she doesn't have, right? So it's just, everyone's going to have their thing. So that's the shoulder base. Now, if you have a more diamondy clavicle base, you can't really do anything about that in terms of your bones, of course, because that's your bones. But you can build your shoulders out. You could pose wider. You could pose a little bit more spread with your shoulders a little bit, you know, push them a little bit without you looking like you're pushing them. You can never look in bikini like you're doing that. You can't like go like this in bikini, but you could open them up like this and make it look like relaxed. And so you just push it a little bit, and everything's pushed and everything's pulled, and you're just trying to find the best way for you to look like you have a wider shoulder base. If you can get an inch on your shoulders, you know, talking a half inch on both, and then push them out another half inch, well, now you just lengthened your shoulder base another full inch on each side, right? So that's kind of how you're taking bits and pieces and gaining inches at a time, an inch here, a half an inch here, you know, and so that's how you do that one. So
yeah, that's how you got to do it. So the next one, I think, you know, most everyone is not an even distributor with their fat deposits, right? So going into this one, I will say, like, for me, I think I'm, for the most part, evenly distributed, but of course, as most females are, glutes, my lower glute area, a little bit on the side of my thighs is where I would distribute my body fat. And I think that's kind of normal for a girl. But I would say it's not as bad as most. So I'm lucky in that sense that I don't really accumulate a lot of fat, whereas one area would get super lean, but that's not the case for everyone. Some people, for example, might have like a, I don't know, like super lean arms and super lean legs, but their midsection is like, has no definition and it's fluffier or whatever the case may be. You've all seen it, and maybe more of a pear-shaped athlete that it's all going to their thighs, all going to their glutes, but their upper body is lean. So, you know, everyone has like their little things like we're talking about, but how does somebody overcome uneven body fat distribution? Uneven body fat distribution is, I'm pretty sure, is going to be the hardest component to like overcome. That one, as far as coaching goes, at least, that's like the hardest one to really nail. I struggle with it too. I know how to fix it, but it's such a long period is the problem. So let's say, for example, I'm gonna give you like a typical scenario, actually a scenario I'm dealing with right now too. I have one athlete she's like amazing, like so good. The tie-ins are crazy good, diamond glutes, like everything. And then the problem is her legs and her shoulders get too lean in order to get her core tight enough, right? If I could get her core tight enough, then her legs and glutes and everything is like way crazy lean. Right. And which in bikini we don't want.
Yeah. And so I'm like, okay, how do I solve this issue? Because she's stuck. There's no going farther if she can't fix this at this point. You know, got in front of Sandy twice. First time Sandy said, yeah, bring her in a little softer on her legs, a little softer on her shoulders, so it's not so crispy. And I was like, yeah. And I was like, you know, the problem I'm running into is when I get her core tight enough, her legs and shoulders are too crispy. And then if I get her legs and shoulders right, her core is too soft, right? And then I was like, I just don't know how to fix that issue. And then Sandy's like, well, that's why you get paid the big bucks. Because she knows how hard it is too, right? Like the solution isn't so easy. Right. So the first solution is, get their legs right, get her shoulders right, and then really develop her core.
Yes.
You could develop that core, then it's going to look a little leaner.
Yeah.
Right?
The muscles projecting out the skin.
Try to get more tortoise shelled, right? Try to get a little bit of that. And then, maybe you can offset the conditioning how that works for that person. That's the first one. We've been trying that for a long time. Our abs aren't really developing so much, right? So it's she also had hernia surgery. So I think there's less connection, like less neuromuscular connection in that area. So it's going to be a lot longer of a process to get her abs where they need to be. So there's that part of it, because it was I think it was 2 hernia surgeries. And so so you deal with that as a coach, right? So the probably the real answer to it, and this is kind of the solution I've come up with, it's just an unfortunate, very lengthy process to get this, is one, still got to get the abs to develop a little bit. You need a little bit more definition of the core, makes you look leaner. But then it is get her shoulders and get her legs bigger. That way she doesn't need to be as lean on her legs and on her shoulders. So we can bring her core in a little bit soft with that ab conditioning. And then if we get her legs, shoulders, and glutes and everything bigger, then it'll still project the same way through the fat with having more body fat. So then everything will look like more complete. So it's still about getting the abs, still about getting everything more developed. And then the other solution on that is have her pose way softer. You need to be bigger, but pose softer so you look the same with being softer. So it's there's all these solutions and workarounds, but on that one, it's a very time consuming one. It's years, it's
right.
Probably 2 years before we can really fix that issue. That's a hard one, right? There's other ones that aren't as hard. Let's say, for example, you store more body fat on your legs, which is more common. And when you get lean on your legs and your tie-ins finally get lean enough, your shoulders and your core is crazy shredded. Well, just pose it softer, just pose your upper body softer, pose your lower body harder, watch yourself in the transition, find that happy balance of conditioning for you. And so it's that's a tricky thing. And that's where this becomes an art form.
Absolutely.
How soft, how hard, how much working out for this? How do you sculpt this? It's one of those things.
Yes.
So.
And I think another thing we can add to this as well, and I've had to do this with one of my athletes, is it's not as efficient of a solution as what you're saying, but it's more of a temporary, let's try quick fix. Just purposely inflame that muscle so that it retains water in that certain area. So meaning if the athlete has super crispy, over the top lean legs, train them really hard before the show and hope that they kind of accumulate some inflammation and water retention, so it gives the appearance that they're a little softer than they are. Now, does that work every time? No, but it's definitely worth a shot, and it does help a little bit, I think. But that's one temporary solution you can do to kind of overcome that.
Yeah, and that works a lot better earlier on, or the less trained someone is too.
Yeah.
So if that's something you need to really plan for, you could almost detrain them going into it for a few weeks and then really train them the day before the show too, if you needed to. But that's a really one-off and Hail Mary solution type of thing, So yeah, it's fun. It's fun. And that's why I like it. That's why I don't think I'll ever retire, because it keeps your brain going. It keeps you okay, what do we do here? Type of scenario. That's where I really that's where I really love this at this point. It's because it just challenges your mind so much, But yeah, it's funny because all these different solutions and all these different issues that you run into. I'm trying to think of other ones that I run into too.
Oh, I have a whole list.
Oh, do you have a? Let's see the next one. These are fun. These are challenging.
Adam, you act like you didn't see it.
I know, but I forgot about that part.
Oh my
I forgot. I thought we went over all the lists though. No, we have the shoulder clavicle,
oh my
body fat
gosh.
distribution.
Narrow hips.
Oh, narrow
What
hips.
do you do with an athlete that has narrow hips? You leave the list to me, okay?
Yeah, see, that's why she's a producer. If you guys don't know, Ashley's the producer of this.
No,
she's
I'm
the
not.
podcast producer.
You're
The lists and everything. It's always
You
so
can
helpful.
see it too.
Yeah.
It's right there.
So narrow hips is a harder one, but it's solvable. You'll see a lot of top pros that don't have the widest set hips, which is great. You see some with really wide set hips, but even they have to work their glutes a lot too. You still have to fill out those wide set hips. So the main thing is that upper outer edge of your glute really helps with selling the waistline. How much back arch you have too is really going to help with that too. If you have a good back arch and you're flexible, your waistline is going to be farther from your glutes in the back pose. So I'm going to give you if you guys are listening to this only, I'm doing this with my hands, but if your lower back you're not very flexible and your glutes are here, I'll do it like this. Your glutes are here and your lower back is here and you're not that flexible, your glutes only project this far out from your lower back and you have narrow set hips. But if you do it this way, I'll turn it this way, and you're more stretched, you're more flexible now, and your back is now this far away from your glutes will look wider because your lower back is farther away, because you're more flexible. It's farther away. Anything that's farther away looks smaller. Anything that's closer looks bigger, right? Do that in pictures. If you want to look big in a picture, out angle your friends, step forward of it, and you'll look way bigger, you know? So that's the same thing with your bikini posing. The more flexible you are, you know, the wider your hips are going to look from the back. If you sit a little farther into your hips in that front pose, which is a trade-off, you know, sometimes it shortens up your torso, it'll look a little bit wider too. So there's things that you could do for that. And then also building up the upper outer edge of your glute is going to be the biggest thing. You know, getting those glutes rounder and fuller from the upper outer edge without completely squaring them off is going to be the key to making them look as wide as you can, at least in the back pose and in that front pose too.
Yeah. In the front pose, I hear a lot of girls say that they purposely like arch their back too and like push their glute. I actually can't arch my back anymore in that front pose. It's already like that. So like I don't arch it, so I can't speak personally, but I have heard that girls kind of do that. They kind of purposely like arch and push their glutes back in order to kind of give the appearance that they're projecting out more than they actually are in the front pose.
Yeah, the trade-off of that is, and I do this here and there, so the trade-off is it shortens up your torso a lot. And it generally throws off your balance. Now, someone like Kimber, she's got all the height in the world. She can get away with it, right? If you have no glute profile, the trade might be worth it for you to push more in that front pose. Understand too, the more you push, the more likely it is that you're going to get more wrinkles in your lower back, and it'll come off as looking a little softer as well. So there's a lot of trade for it, especially in balance. And the balance is the biggest one. Balance is always going to outweigh kind of everything.
Right.
I'd rather have better balance than glutes. You know?
Yes. And I think a lot of bikini competitors make that mistake. They think it's like such an important emphasis on the glutes. And it is, but it's not the only thing. It's about balance, not who has the biggest glutes. I will see girls sit way too heavy into that glute. And yeah, their glutes look better, but their waistline got shortened. It's thicker now. And it's just not overall, the symmetry is now off, you know? So it's about symmetry. Now, wellness is a different story, and that's why you see them really, really push when they're posing. That's not about symmetry. It's more lower body dominant. But in bikini, we're still looking for symmetry. So, like, I know a lot of people are tempted to make their glutes look a lot better. I get it. But in bikini, you need to make sure everything matches, not just who has the best glutes. Yeah. So always keep that in mind. Yeah,
it's unfortunate because sometimes the girls with the best like backstage bodies have, you know, no chance at winning that show. Because I'm like, man, you need to just stay on Instagram and like be an Instagram influencer because your body's crazy, but it doesn't translate to the stage, you know, because you're overpowering in your glutes and it's awesome and everyone in the world would like to look like you off stage, but on stage you're gonna have to lose some of those glutes. You're gonna have to do something, you know. So it's an unfortunate thing because people don't see that connection and how you're gonna fix that balance to make you a better bikini athlete. And it's a hard thing to do, especially for the girls who really like to lift hard. That's where I run into the biggest issue where I'm like, okay, you've reached your max muscle. Like we need to pull back. That's when girls are like, oh, I just really like to work out. Like I really like it. Or, oh, I really like training glutes. Or, oh, I really like the way I look in my, you know, I don't want to change it for the sport. I'm like, you need to make a decision, you know, it's either you do it for the sport or you do it for your own self. But if you want to excel at this point, you need to do it this way. And that's just, these are the reasons. And so it's up to you. And so that's the unfortunate part is you have to look a certain way for the sport and you have to find what's more important to you on that at that point too, you know. Absolutely. It's not a super common scenario, but it does happen eventually. It'll happen to everyone eventually. Eventually you'll run into that wall. So
absolutely. So another issue that a lot of girls have is being too quad dominant. And these are the girls that maybe like they'll do a lunge and they only feel it in their quad, or they'll squat and they only feel it in their quad, nowhere else. They don't have any activation in their hams or glutes or anything. It's just all quad, quad, quad. And for some people, it's hard to kind of get that mind to muscle connection anywhere else but that area. So, in bikini, they don't want the heavy quad look, right? In wellness, yes, they sure do. But in bikini, you need to keep those quads in check because they can definitely make you look a little bit blocky in your legs, especially if you don't have hamstrings to match. So if anything, I think it'd be a little more beneficial to be hamstring dominant than quad dominant in bikini, but not to an insane extent where it's just like way overpowered. You know what I mean? So keeping the quads in check is super important. And, obviously the exercises that you choose are going to have a lot to do with it. You might want to do more isolated exercises for your hams, for your glutes, and try to avoid those compound movements if you can only feel it in your quads. I think even with cardio, I would say I would avoid even the stationary bike too. Even though it's cardio and it's not necessarily going to, it's not like you're going to explode with muscle. I think the less you can activate that quad, the better, because when you're doing the spin bike, that's usually a very quad dominant exercise. So just be aware of like the exercises you're doing and stick to more isolated movements to kind of get those hams, get those glutes to catch up a bit.
Yeah. You know, what's funny is that, when you're in like schooling for exercise science and training and even like certifications and stuff, we talk about, anaerobic and aerobic exercises, right? Mm-hmm. So aerobic activity would basically be like, running is an aerobic activity. You're not going to build muscle from running, right? Because it's past the rep range of, they say anything past, well, they used to say, I haven't been in school in forever, anything past the rep range of 25 becomes a aerobic activity, right? Versus an anaerobic activity. And you're not going to really build muscle from aerobic activity. It just works on your cardio capacity and your ability to uptake oxygen and stuff. And the muscles start working in a different way. But then you see in that argument, scientifically, you'd be like, okay, well, they can do the bike. This shouldn't be a problem. It's an aerobic activity, right? But then you look at like actual, like anecdotal evidence of people who do bikes. Like, right? Bikers are huge.
Oh, yeah. They got that their quads like hanging off.
Skinny upper bodies, huge quads.
Yeah.
Ice skaters, right?
Uh-huh.
Those ice skating guys, like huge quads, small upper bodies. You look like wellness guys.
Yeah, totally.
Like wellness dudes.
Yeah. And I haven't heard this analogy from you in a while, but I think we should go back into it. It's the blacksmith arm analogy.
Oh, yeah.
So you can explain that one because I think it's perfect for this.
Yeah. So what people, that's another, yeah, perfect. So we say aerobic, anaerobic activity, but then we would talk about doing like people who do labor, right? A certain activity all the time the same way. So like a blacksmith banging on whatever, horseshoes or whatever he's blacksmithing, has like these jacked arms and his ability to recover at a very fast rate because he's doing it all day, every day. So the same thing there, we talk about development of a certain area. Your body has to be able to, the whole reason we build muscle is because of the activity that we're doing, But
also mention the arm that uses the hammer is the one that's more developed.
Yes.
You forgot to put that, which is probably the most important thing that I was trying to get at.
Yes. So yes, overuse of one area.
Arm would be
much more developed.
Yes.
Much more
developed.
We go. There's actually this.
We're getting there.
Yes. There's actually this guy who's he's a total freak show, and he does it on purpose. So it's okay to say that he's a total freak show. Look this guy up if you're there or on YouTube, and he is a arm wrestler, and he trains one arm, and it's crazy how big his arm is. It's like, I don't know if he does it for intimidation. I don't know if there's part of his like a genetic issue. I don't know what it is, but like there's videos of him I've seen, and he's got one arm that's like full on bodybuilder arm, and then one arm's just like totally regular.
Yeah,
and it's like he trains one, so it will distribute according to how you're training it.
Right.
But the other thing to take from that, one is repetitive movements on let's say you're doing something wrong all the time and you're doing squats, but you're always lifting harder with your right leg. Yes, your right leg can be more developed than your left leg. But the other thing to take from that is because the blacksmith is doing that all day, every day, he can now recover at a much faster rate, which is if me and you went in and started doing the same work he did, we'd be thrashed for a week, right? Mm-hmm. So the same thing applies to how I talked about earlier with, let's say, this does flow into this fairly well. Let's say you have everything's there on your body, but your shoulders need more development. Well, again, taking that blacksmith thing, right? You can start increasing the volume, increasing the frequency, and then recover just like the blacksmith did and start doing more. You see this in wellness in Brazil. They're working their legs all the time, which was really over the last 3 years has been really eye-opening to me with how we can get away with training volume. I was pretty shocked by what they're doing over there for wellness, where they have legs like every day, and then they do one day where it's more specific to quads, and one day it's more specific to hamstrings and glutes, one day it's more specific to quads, but they're still doing those compound movements within those days. And I'm like, that seems like impossible. But then you see the results, and you're like, okay, I can't argue with the results. But again, we're talking about a scenario that's not normal. The blacksmith, they're doing it every day for years. Yes. It's different, right? So,
and the blacksmith isn't like lifting. He's just doing a repetitive movement, which would kind of, I guess what I was trying to tie it into was like the repetitive movement on a spin bike will activate. So the less activation in the muscle that you're trying to not grow, the better.
Yep. Yeah. So it is kind of cool, right? How our sport can go outside of the examples of science that they would say you couldn't do, because there's a lot of the stuff we're talking about here. It doesn't make sense on paper. And any exercise guy, and this is the problem with our sport too, is that a lot of us still look at it as health and fitness, and we look at regular health and fitness like protocol to do it. Your nutritional guidance. If you put our diets in front of a registered dietitian, they would be like, don't do that diet. Like, there's not enough fats, there's not enough this, you have too much protein. Like, any registered dietitian, and I'll tell, like, if someone talks to a regular dietitian or something with a diet that's for contest prep, I'm like, they're gonna tell you that we're killing you. You know, every doctor's like that too. Like, just things they don't know about. Oh no, you shouldn't take creatine. That creatine it'll kill you, man. Like a doctor, they just don't know like what we do. I don't know why you need these supplements. So it's the same thing with a dietitian. They'll see our diet and be like, oh yeah, this is way too high in protein. It'll hurt your kidneys. It'll raise your cholesterol. It's not enough calories. Your fats are too low. It'll hurt your heart. Like, it's not that. It's not health and fitness. We're not doing dietitian diets to do regular health and fitness diets. We're trying to look a certain way. We're trying to look badass, you know? It's not for comfort. It's not in health and fitness. And if you start applying these regular practices that you see in like these studies, some of them, yes, apply, but like there's this funny saying that says, hey, show me that study with that 200-pound bodybuilder that's 5% body fat.
Right.
And that's the case. It's like, oh yeah, so you don't have one? Okay, because we are not the norm. Yeah. You can't use that for the norm. Right. And so these practices are very, that we're talking about are tricky, advanced. You might not be ready for some of them. You might be the posing stuff, whatever, but you know, the overtraining on the one certain part of the body, you might be able to handle that. You might not. You know, the things that Ashley's are talking about, you might be able to handle that stuff. You might not. Right. You might hate wearing a waist trainer and a belt all the time, every time you work out, because your waist's a little wider, you know? You're going to have to come up with what's more important to you, doing the sport well or taking these little sacrifices to make yourself better. And it's an unfortunate thing. And it comes down, and here's the one that you guys are going to hate. Sometimes it comes down to food too. You don't want to hear that if you stay lean in the off season, your waistline will be leaner in the in season. People don't want to hear that.
Yep.
It's the reality of things.
I have a theory for that too.
Let's hear that.
Well, so whenever you do put on weight, you're kind of like your tummy's always full and you're kind of always in a like eating big meals and stuff. So I think that you can kind of, I don't know, your muscle kind of develops over the little belly you got, you know what I mean? And then like it's, you know what I'm saying? Like it kind of, the tighter you can keep it, the better. Cause it kind of, your muscles kind of develop to that shape. Whereas like if 10 months out of the year, it's used to kind of taking the shape of like a distended stomach versus like a tummy that's been rather flat for the most part. Yeah. And how do you prove that, right? It's one of those things. How do you prove it? So what the other part of it is too, that we have to think about. And I think people want to choose to not pay attention to this because it is uncomfortable and they want to eat. You know, some people like to eat whatever they want to eat and then they on a diet really hard. And that's, some people like to do that. But the reality is very few people are going to be successful doing that. And there is something you're going to have to pay for that at a certain point. And I want to use this example too, because if you've heard of the rubber band process that they do for stomachs, it's like they band it. Am I saying that right, Melena? Rubber band. So basically they go into people and they will put a band on their stomach. I think it's called the lat band. Yes, that's what it is. Am I right? Okay, cool. So excuse me if I'm wrong on that. But what you'll see happen is they'll basically put a rubber band on their stomach. It'll basically cut their stomach into like half, right? Being half. So when they eat, they're eating half the amount of food, but they're getting super full because they're taking up the whole stomach that's available, right? Something like that. So that's the process of it. But what happens with those people is they start eating more, and then they start eating more, and they slowly start eating more, and then that stomach gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and then they're eating the same amount, but still have the other half of the stomach that's still like taped off from being accessible and usable for food, right? So that just is proof your stomach can grow. So your internal organs, the more food you consume, will be pushing out the stomach farther, right? That's just one part of it, not talking about your body not having a good digestive system from eating foods that maybe your body doesn't agree with the most cleanest foods, single ingredient foods. And
and having, digestive issues, that pushes your stomach out a little bit too, a little bit of bloating and whatnot too, right? You're combining all these things. And if you think your stomach's just going to shrink up because you shortened your food window for 12 weeks before a show, it's going to take a little longer than that. Right. Yes, you're still going to have be paying that price after. Is that a fact? Is that a theory? I think it's right in the middle there. But I will say this, there's a lot of and I talk about these bodybuilders a lot too, because it's again, another good example. But when bodybuilders started getting this bigger gut in the last few years, really in the last, you've seen a lot of it since they've gotten really a lot bigger, right? And everyone's like, oh, they're just doing too many steroids. It's a roid gut, this and that. And I'm like, you guys, it's not this huge internal organ growth. They're eating more food to support the amount of muscle that they can have now. And you have to eat to support that extra tissue, that extra metabolic tissue. And because they're eating more, of course, their internal organs and stomach is going to be a little bigger. They're eating, 20% more. So of course their stomach's going to be 20% more protruded out. You can't, there's no give without a take. Nothing is a give without a take in the world, really. So that's more likely the cause than any internal organ growth in terms of from steroids and whatnot, because when you see these guys get done and retire, their stomachs come right back down because what happened? They stopped eating the food again. And I'm like, the same thing applies to a lower degree with bikini, but it's an inconvenient truth. And, I hate to harp on it, but that is part of it too. If we're trying to sculpt the ultimate machine of bikini competitor, it's a 24/7, 365 thing. Maybe a 364, we'll give you a day.
Day.
But there's ways around. You can have your free meal weekly. You can have a free meal daily if you keep the calories in check, things like that. But, I'm not saying that it has to be completely crazy, but the girls who are blowing up, they are giving themselves a disadvantage on not just getting that body fat off, but in the end result, if you have, and you could look at the people who keep it really tight, they have really small waistlines. You could look at Ashley, you could look at Issa, you could look at Janet. They all they never blow up, and they always have the smallest waistlines, right? And it's progressively gets smaller, and you're like, how? It's already tiny. How's your waistline gotten smaller the last 4 years, right? And it's you're in the same condition. It doesn't make sense. So what's going on? Is it the waist training that you're doing? Is it the food eating? Or is it just you keeping your food volume small for long periods? We're doing all these things, so it's hard to isolate which it is. But one thing that's not happening is it's not staying the same or getting bigger. So, that's another interesting one. We're talking about high level bikini tactics here. There is a point of crossing where you're like, okay, I need to commit to this. I need to see how good I can actually be at this. And I need to do this hard for 2 years because this is what's going to take, Mm-hmm. So there's that one.
There's that. So I think we have time for 2 more here, and let's kind of combine them. So what would you say to a competitor that is actually too muscular for bikini? And what would you say to a competitor that's too soft, right? Yeah. So, with the muscular bikini girl, and this goes back to what you're saying, some girls are really stubborn. You tell them to chill out on the weights a little bit and they just keep going. I'm not like that. If something of me was overdeveloped, I'd be like, oh, cool, less to worry about. Yeah. All right, I don't have to train that.
We did it once.
Some girls,
we did it once.
Yeah, some girls, they just are very stubborn and they're like, no, I just want to keep lifting heavy, even though they're overly muscular. And I think, at that point, just like you said, you got to make a decision. Do you want to move up a division or do you want to just not be at the top of the game in bikini? That's something you need to ask yourself. But maybe there's something to meet in the middle. Maybe do more of a high rep or lower weights, but still be able to lift, but probably not be able to lift like you were.
Yeah, to be honest, if they're there and we confirmed that they're there, that's another thing too, is confirming that you're there in the right shape, right? That means you've worked up to, getting in front of the right judges. You're getting in front of, the Sandys, the Tylers, the judges that have the real trained eye at the high level, the Olympia level judges. And they said that, and they said, yeah, you're too jacked for bikini. And they said that, and you came in the right shape too. You weren't just too big for bikini, but you were in the right shape and you were too big for bikini. Because sometimes it can look like you're too big because you still have body fat on you. And body fat adds a layer of size. There's no way around that. It's just more size, period, right? So, but if you're perfect conditioning and they say you're too big and it's like a Tyler or a Sandy, you're going to need to make a decision. There's really no way around it. Even working out, it's funny. I'll run into some girls and they'll have crazy quads. There was one who was so stubborn and I was like, I wasn't even her coach, but I I just knew her. She was from Vegas. And I was like, every time I see you, you're still training quads. And she's like, well, I'm only doing squats like twice a week. And that's the only quad exercise I do because I like doing squats. And I'm like, it's cool that you like doing squats, but I know you don't like winning because you're not going to get your quads any smaller by doing squats twice a week only, right? To her, it's only, right? But I'm like, you will maintain your muscle, maintain, maybe even grow doing that twice a week.
Definitely.
I'm like, so go up to wellness if that's your thing,
Exactly.
like it is what it is, but you're not going to be, if you pass bikini, you either reduce or you go up to the division. You have to make a decision on that, unfortunately.
Absolutely. And if the competitor is overly muscular overall, and let's say they're not overly lean either, a little short-term tactic you can try is just coming in very flat.
Yeah.
Like just,
I didn't think about that. Sorry about that.
You know what I mean? You better be sorry, Adam. I'm about to take your job.
You are.
I'm about to take your job.
Hey, that's the eventual path, Ashley. That's the eventual path of this.
No, I'm just kidding.
Ashley's going to run this one day.
No. I'll be the athlete. I like my position to be the mascot. I'm the mascot. There we go. So, that's something you can try. But again, that only applies to a certain scenario. Firstly, you got to make sure that this competitor is like evenly just overall too muscular, right? But also how soft are they, or you know what I mean? So a lot that goes into it, but it is something you can definitely try. Unfortunately, you can't like target necessarily where to be flat other than just not train that muscle group. But if it's an overall thing, obviously that just is more of a calorie issue, or maybe even water too. But this is a very rare scenario.
Yeah, and you have to make sure that person is still round and bubbly when they're flat. Yeah, that's the thing too. So not everyone can be still looking good and muscular when they're flat. That's a problem. So. And that's you run into that with like Ashley has a good example of that. When she flattens out, it's not usually that bad. She's still round still, but she'll err of being a little bit leaner when she's a little bit more flat. So for her, it's like, get her full, but she might be a little softer too. So it's like that perfect balance for her is really hard to hit that perfectly, but there is a margin of error where she still looks good, which is really great, right? But if she feels a little too much, she'll look rounder, a little fuller, but not as tight. She looks a little, it gets a little leaner, a little flatter. Yeah, her crispy tie-in showing a little bit more, things like that. So it's like, if we could nail it every time perfectly, that'd be awesome, but that's not going to be possible. Hopefully at the big ones we will, but that's the scenario that you'll see with everyone's going to be a little bit different. So yeah, that's one way of doing it. And then, this is just like any other sport, you really do have to commit to the sport. And I think that if you think you're going to get to the high level by kind of, like doing some things 100%, other things just for you, it's just really not, at a certain point will stop working.
Absolutely.
You're going to have to commit to it. And that's the thing, like Ashley trains for bikini. That's it. Like there's nothing else.
Right. I'm not training to run long distances. I'm not training to, like you're training for boxing, but I'm training just to look good in a bikini. So my training's a lot different than a performance sport athlete, since I was a former track athlete myself. So yeah, the training much different, when track, I was doing like a lot of plyos, a lot of track repeats, 400 meter repeats. I always talk about that being like the hardest workout, 400 meter repeats till I puke. But yeah, it's totally different with bikini. So obviously you got to just train for your sport. Yeah. So quickly now, what about an athlete that is chronically too soft and very stubborn body when it comes to losing body fat? Because I think there's like a certain type that like they have that like baby soft skin,
tough one.
And it's like it looks like thicker skin, which doesn't mean that because they're soft is just because of the skin, but that's one thing that can go into it. And they're just, having a really tough time getting lean. What do you have to suggest for them? Yeah,
what I do with these ones is, because I have a few of them myself, they know who they are too. The best answer, and this is an unfortunate repetitive answer that I have for them, the best answer for those people is to get them, do whatever you have to do to get them stage lean one time. That might be a ridiculous prep. That might be one of these extreme preps that I'm pretty much against. That might be that 2-hour cardio, really low cardio, really high cardio, low calorie prep, sorry. And then after they get there that one time, I say first prep, worst prep. After that, I try to keep them pretty close to that at that point. I try to bring their calories up, bring their cardio down, but we give them like a number in the off season. Like, hey, your preps are so hard that I don't want you to get past this number, right? Or whatever it is. Usually it's like a waistline number more so than a weight number. hip and waistline number. And then once we get your calories up just a little bit, which it still might be a lower calorie off season, it might be, a 1,600 calorie maintenance off season for this girl. It might be a 30-minute cardio daily session for this girl in the off season. But once we get that starting point being there and she only has to lose, 8 pounds to get in stage shape, then we go, modestly hard for 8 weeks, and then we go pretty hard for the last 8 weeks to get her that last bit. So the starting point matters for them a lot more than the starting point for someone who the weight falls off of pretty easily. So that's really the best answer is that starting point for them. If they go too far in the off season, we're probably going to run into a hard aggressive prep again. Mm-hmm. So that's a tough one too. That's a really tough one. There's not really another good answer for it besides, building a little bit more muscle so the muscles need to be as lean.
Right.
But, you run into that wall eventually too. So that one is very off season specific. So,
yeah. Well, there you have it.
Yeah. I guess that was fun. It's a fun episode, but it's also like a realist, it's like almost like that's me.
Well,
Someone's like, that's
but
me.
now you have solutions. But just so you know, leaving off on a good note, everyone has their flaws. For sure. Everyone. So I can't stress that enough. No one is complete out there. There is always something you can improve, and everyone has an issue like maybe the ones we talked about that have to kind of work around. So you're not alone. You're just like everyone else. So.
Yeah, I think that's important too, is to look at everyone. You look at these top level bikini girls and you think, oh, they're flawless, they're this or that. Like, it's important to know that they're not, but they give off the appearance of looking that way because it's essentially their job to do that. That's their profession to do that. So they're doing a good job, but just know that you are not, you're not far from the perfection. Everyone's far from perfection. So I think that's a good thing to take from it too,
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
So this Friday, Adam.
Yes. Oh yeah.
There's something exciting happening this Friday in Denver.
There is on Thursday and on Friday. Actually,
Thursday. Oh my God.
No, Thursday and Friday. You're right.
Yeah, but mostly Thursday.
Mostly Thursday. Yes.
Thursday. Sorry.
We have
Thursday.
This Thursday. We have a posing seminar. We're back home at Armbrust Pro Gym.
Where it all started, Denver,
6 p.m. Armbrust Pro Gym. We have our posing seminar is free. They do charge a day pass. I think it's $15, but use that gym while you're there. So take advantage of that $15. Our posing class is free. Awesome gym. Get there early. They have a great leg room. It's like the only leg room in Denver, unless it's changed since I've left. But they have a full leg room, glutes, very specific. But awesome gym, awesome owner Dylan, who's there, who's also an IFBB pro judge. So yeah, we'll be there 6 o'clock, and then on Friday, Angels is going to have another
Angel
seminar.
Competition Bikini.
Angel Competition Bikini. I love Angel Competition Bikini. Definitely
Me too.
And I don't want to say it. I do want to say it out loud. That's my favorite in the business company. I'm just so close with them. They treat me so good for so long, such a long period of time. Just great company. So they're going to have another seminar. I'll be doing that one too after check-ins at the check-in hotel. So yeah. It'll be a fun weekend in Denver.
Going back to where it all started, Denver, Colorado.
I love Denver. Yeah.
Where you used to live and that's the old Contest Prep Center location. And even Armbrust Gym was where I initially started training when we connected as coach and athlete. So yeah, it's going to bring back some good memories.
Yeah, it's fun. It's a happy and sad thing at the same time, because it's like I see my old crew and it was like such a good family. Like, it was just a vibe there, It is. Mm-hmm. I just know I couldn't retire in that snow. There's no way I was going to live there forever. I just couldn't do it. I love you guys in Denver, but I don't love your snow. So anyway, guys, we will see you. Hopefully I'll see a lot of you at the Mile High on Saturday too. I'll be there at the NPC show on Saturday. So say hi if you see me. And
say hi, don't be shy.
Yes. So a whole weekend of events. And Tokyo Joe's, that's the best part.
Oh, Tokyo Joe's.
Tokyo Joe's, yeah.
My gosh.
I went to Tokyo. I didn't see Joe anywhere. All right, guys. With that, I'll talk to you later. Thank you guys so much for watching.